You know when you do everything right and still end up being treated like a problem? Yeah, I paid for Christmas dinner, covered almost everything, and 2 days before the holiday, my parents told me it'd be better if I didn't come. Hi, I'm Margot, and this is the story of how I changed the delivery address and changed the direction of my life. Grab your coffee, sit down with me, because you're going to want to hear this one. Ever since I was young, I knew that if I wanted something, I had to go after it. While my cousins got weekly allowances, I was selling homemade chocolates at school. My parents taught me to be responsible, but more than that, they taught me to fend for myself. I worked front desks, retail, unpaid internships, until I finally landed the job I have now. It wasn't easy. It never was. But I made it happen. I'd wake up early, go to bed late, skip parties everyone else went to. And now at 32, I have stability, a solid paycheck, and a certain kind of loneliness. Because no matter how successful I became, I was never quite welcome. Especially not by certain members of my own family. My parents are good people, but they have one fatal flaw: they hate conflict. They'd rather please everyone, even if it means sacrificing my peace. So they'd always ask me to understand my unemployed uncles. They're going through a hard time, sweetheart. Try to be patient. But patience doesn't pay for peace. And this particular aunt and uncle duo always push the line. They've asked me for money, tried to drag me into their debt problems. And their kids, my cousins, took after them perfectly, always jabbing at me like my hard work was something to be ashamed of. Still, every time there's a family gathering, I show up. And this year, with Christmas approaching, my parents decided to host the whole family. There'd be about 15 of us total. My parents, 2 brothers, uncles, aunts, cousins. The original plan was simple. Everyone chips in. We share the cost of a modest dinner. I was actually happy. I thought, for once, it might be low pressure. But it didn't take long before the classic line popped up. Margot, do you think you could cover just a little more this year? Only that little more turned into almost everything. My parents said, since they were hosting at their house, they shouldn't have to pay, and that my struggling aunt and uncle couldn't afford it, so it'd be kind if I covered for them too. In the end, I was paying for the bulk of Christmas dinner. I ordered the roast, the stuffed chicken, the sides, the desserts. All in my name, on my card, split into 3 scheduled deliveries. Everyone else brought soda, napkins, plastic utensils, symbolic stuff. No one asked if it was fair. They just expected me to say yes. Like always, as if being the responsible one meant I had to carry it all. Of course I was uncomfortable, but I said yes, because I still believed they'd see it as generosity, not obligation. I tried to lift my own mood, chose the menu carefully, scheduled the deliveries just right. Even though I was tired, I pictured the family gathered, laughing, exchanging gifts. In my mind, this was me investing in peace. What I didn't know was that I'd be the only one without a seat at that table. While I was paying, some were talking behind my back. While I was trying to please, others were keeping score. And while I dreamed of a family Christmas, they were planning to cut me out of it. All because I wasn't the kind of person who bows her head. And because, deep down, independence always bothers the ones who live off others. My brothers tried to say something. One of them even whispered, "You're doing all of this alone." But no one challenges our parents, especially not Aunt Lucy and Uncle Joel. They're loud, manipulative, and world-class at playing the victim. At the last family gathering, they cut me off mid-sentence just because I disagreed with them. Still, when I was asked to cover their portion of the dinner, I said yes. Almost like muscle memory. The old, say yes to keep the peace. But the truth is, every time I said yes, I lost a piece of myself. And no one seemed to notice. Or worse, maybe they did, and chose to take advantage anyway. The week before Christmas felt calm on the surface. Group messages were mild, polite. My orders were confirmed. Delivery windows set. Everything was to be dropped off directly at my parents' house. I even bought myself a new outfit. Nothing fancy, just something nice for the evening. I genuinely wanted the night to be peaceful. But there was one thing I couldn't shake, that heavy silence whenever I showed up. Like I didn't quite belong in the house I grew up in. Like, to some of them, I only mattered when I was paying. Even so, 2 days before Christmas, I went to my parents' house to help with decorations. I showed up with bags of ornaments, ready to pretend everything was fine. But stepping through the door felt like entering a space I no longer fit in. My mom seemed off. My dad wouldn't look me in the eye. Something was wrong. I just didn't realize that, after everything I'd done, they'd actually have the nerve to uninvite me from the dinner I practically paid for. I set the decorations down on the table, waiting for someone to say something. But no one did. My mom offered me a cup of coffee without looking me in the eye. My dad was on his phone, pretending not to notice I was even there. The nearby uncles weren't around, but their presence still lingered in the air. I stood there for a few minutes, trying to make conversation. "So, where do you want me to hang these lights?" That's when my mom sighed and said quietly, "Margot, we need to talk." The conversation was short and brutal. "Your father and I talked, and we think it's best if you don't come to Christmas dinner this year." It hit like a brick to the chest. I blinked a few times, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. "What do you mean? I've already paid for everything." "What happened?" My mom looked away. My dad finally spoke. "It's just, your presence might make some people uncomfortable." By some people, he meant the same uncles and cousins I'd offered to cover. "You know you don't get along with them, and we don't want it to turn into a tense evening." And then came the worst part. "You're just not the right energy for this kind of gathering." I didn't cry. Not there. I just stood still, my soul trying to rearrange itself inside my body. I was the one who paid, who planned, who only wanted to be with family. But they didn't just uninvite me. They blamed me. Like I was the problem, not the years of manipulation, freeloading, and fake jokes at my expense. My mom tried to soften the blow. "It's just this year." My dad added, "It's for the best, really. No drama that way." I nodded, said nothing. I packed up the decorations I had brought and left. The way you leave a place that clearly no longer has space for you. When I got home, I sat in the dark. And for the first time, I understood the role they had written for me in this family. Useful, but never loved. And that had to end. The next morning, still in pajamas, I sat down at my computer. I opened my emails and pulled up all the order confirmations. The roast, the stuffed chicken, the desserts, the sides, everything. All in my name. My billing info, my schedule, every delivery still under my control. I closed my eyes for a moment, and then I made my decision. They weren't going to use what was mine to erase me. I picked up the phone and started calling each vendor. Polite, calm, firm. "Hi, I need to change the delivery address." No one gave me trouble. Most of them responded with a simple, "Of course, Ms. Margot." Done. And as I made those calls, one by one, it felt like I was reclaiming little pieces of myself I had let slip away. Sometimes, silence says more than any argument ever could. They thought they were cutting me out. But really, I was setting myself free. I took a deep breath after the last call. The new address was mine. The dinner was mine. I started tidying up the house. No real plan, just following a feeling. I didn't know who'd be there, or what kind of night it would turn into. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done being the idiot who pays to be unwanted. They wanted me gone. Fine. But they were about to learn. You don't uninvite someone from the party and still expect to keep the presents. Dinner was still happening, just not the one they were counting on. After changing all the delivery addresses, I hung up the phone and just sat there in silence. It hit me. For the first time in a long while, I was doing something purely for me. Not out of duty. Not to keep the peace. Not to prove anything. Just for me. The apartment was clean but empty. And honestly, I felt the same way. So I grabbed a cloth, put on a soft playlist, and started reorganizing everything. I pulled out the tablecloth I'd been saving for some special moment. Well, this was it. I found candles I'd never used, plates tucked away since last year. Simple things. But they meant something now. I picked up my phone and, without thinking too much, messaged 5 people. Close friends, the kind we often forget to invite to fancy gatherings, but always remember when our heart feels heavy. "Hey, I know it's super last minute, but I'm doing a small Christmas dinner at my place. Nothing fancy, just a quiet night with people who actually like me. If you're free, I'd love to have you." I didn't need to explain. They understood without asking. Within minutes, the replies started coming in. Leaving work now, I'll stop by. Count me in. I'll bring wine. And just like that, I felt something I hadn't in days, a good kind of anticipation. The first delivery showed up around 5 p.m. Then came the sides, holiday rice, creamy salad, seasoned stuffing. I laid everything out on the table, still not entirely sure what I was doing, but knowing it felt right. Then the meats arrived, rich with aroma. My apartment started to smell like a real Christmas dinner. It was strange and comforting. Like, in the middle of rejection, I had recovered a piece of myself I'd forgotten. That smell didn't just fill the room. It reminded me I still belonged somewhere. My friends began to arrive, each one holding a bag, a bottle, a smile that said, "I'm here." No one asked questions, just hugs. They dropped things off in the kitchen, helped light candles, set the table. Someone played Christmas music from their phone. Another showed up with warm pastries. There was no rehearsal. And somehow, it all turned out better than any family gathering I'd ever been to. Laughter started before the first toast. And when I finally sat down at the table, I realized there was no emptiness. Only presence, wholeness, real people. As we passed dishes and poured drinks, stories started to flow. Someone brought up an awkward high school memory. Another confessed a horrible first date. The wine made space for laughter, then for honest confessions. And I started laughing too. The real kind. The kind that doesn't ask permission. That doesn't come with guilt or judgment. No one looked at me with comparison. No one made me feel like I was wrong for having succeeded. At that table, I wasn't the one who paid for everything. I wasn't too much or hard to handle. I was just Margot. And that was enough. The night went on without us noticing. Plates were empty. Music softened. Lights dimmed. One friend leaned over and whispered, "Thank you for inviting me. I needed this." I almost replied, "Me too." Because inside that small apartment, with zero luxury and zero pressure, I had found something I didn't realize I'd been missing. Not a party, not a perfect evening, just a space where I didn't have to explain myself. At my parents' house, dinner was supposed to start at 6, but as the clock ticked on, only silence showed up at the door. The guests began arriving slowly, and with each one, the tension grew thicker. The aunts whispered among themselves, and the freeloading cousins, of course, showed up empty-handed, just like always. Bit by bit, my parents started to realize something was off. They called the caterers. Nothing was scheduled for that address. They tried calling me, multiple times. But me? I chose silence. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But sometimes, peace requires distance. My phone kept buzzing on the table unanswered, because in that moment, I wasn't with them. I was with myself. Back in their house, the unease was building. No one knew who to blame, until one of the cousins, the loudest one, finally said it out loud. "You uninvited her and thought the food would still show up?" No one responded, but the shame in the room said more than words ever could. My mom placed a supermarket cake in the center of the table. Lukewarm soda was poured into disposable cups like it was a middle school party. Guests exchanged awkward glances, trying to pretend they weren't disappointed. My dad opened a bag of chips like that was going to fix something. The atmosphere was stiff, flat. All they could do was sit in the space where something warm was supposed to be. But nothing warm arrived. Meanwhile, in my apartment, the candles were already glowing. Soft music played in the background, wrapping the room in comfort. The plates were nearly empty. The glasses were full. And the hearts around the table were open and grateful. At some point, someone raised a glass and said, "To Margot." I blushed, caught off guard, but lifted my glass too. To the surprises that save our Christmas. Laughter. Hugs. Eyes that didn't need to say anything, because they already said it all. Back at my parents' house, my mom sat on the couch staring into nothing. She tried to smile, but her eyes betrayed her. My dad, holding an empty plate, finally said under his breath, "We made a mistake." The others pretended not to hear, because it's always easier to blame the unexpected than to admit you chose the wrong side. At one point, one of my brothers tried calling me again. I saw it light up on my screen, but I let it ring, not out of anger, out of respect. Respect for myself, for the space my friends were giving me, for the peace I had finally built, If I had picked up that call, I would have stepped right back into the role I always played. The understanding one. The one who listens, absorbs, forgives on command. But I wasn't that version of me anymore. I didn't need to beg for scraps of affection just to feel included. My table was full. And this time, so was I. There, between 5 friends and a quiet dinner, I found something my family never managed to offer. Real presence. After her second plate, one of my friends leaned in and whispered, "Thank you for inviting me. This was the best Christmas I've ever had." She smiled and gently held my hand, and that meant more than any fancy toast. The others nodded, each one sharing stories from childhood, or memories of holidays spent feeling completely alone. Somehow, all of us needed that night, and without even realizing it, I had brought together women just like me. Women who'd learned to stand on their own, but still longed for softness, for connection. While that was happening in my apartment, my parents' house was stuck in slow motion. Utensils clinked against nearly empty plates, and the table looked more like a last-minute office party than Christmas dinner. Conversations dried up once it became obvious that the main dishes weren't coming. My uncles tried to act casual, but everyone knew exactly where the blame was. My father barely spoke. My mother tried to keep the energy light, but her eyes were red. She knew. They all did, but admitting it out loud was a different story. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mom. "Sweetheart, can we talk sometime?" I stared at the screen for a few seconds and took a deep breath. The pain was still there, but it didn't control me anymore. I replied calmly, "Of course, whenever you're ready." Then I set the phone down and walked back into the room. One of the girls was strumming a guitar. The others were laughing at a joke I hadn't even caught. But I laughed too. That kind of laugh that sneaks up on you. That doesn't ask permission. And I realized I wasn't alone. At the end of the night, I helped clear the table and tossed a blanket over the couch. One by one, my friends left, each goodbye a warm, real hug. And as I stood in the quiet, I made myself a silent promise. Never again will I give myself to people who don't want me around. I woke up late on the 25th. No anxiety, no hope of being called, no fear of letting anyone down. My phone was full of messages, and this time, none of them were asking for anything. My parents had written early that morning. My dad admitted he was wrong, said he let himself be influenced, that he thought avoiding conflict was the right thing to do. My mom was more emotional. "I felt ashamed looking at the table without you there. They asked to talk, and I said yes, but on my terms. I let Christmas pass, let the dust settle, but hoped their conscience wouldn't. When we met, days later, they were different. My dad less defensive, my mom visibly softer. We sat down with no food on the table, no party around us, just us. They apologized, truly. They listened. No excuses. And I, with a steady voice, said, "I'm still your daughter, but now I'm also someone who knows how to set boundaries." They nodded, didn't cry, but the silence between us said they understood. I didn't cut ties with my family, but I didn't return to how things were either. I said I wouldn't offer financial help to people who only came around to ask for it. I said I wouldn't accept invitations with conditions attached, that my presence was not up for trade. They promised to respect that, and I promised to respect myself, because peace without dignity isn't peace at all. I went back home with a new kind of feeling, not relief that passes, but a steady kind of clarity. This time, I had chosen myself, and I didn't choose myself out of anger or guilt. I chose myself because for the first time I understood real love requires respect. In the days that followed, the family group chat went quiet. Some tried to reconnect. I answered politely, but kept my distance. My boundaries were now visible and firm. I kept talking to my parents, but without the old rescuer role. I went back to being their daughter, not their provider. They started treating me with more care, less assumption, and honestly, that was already a small victory. I stopped going to family gatherings that made me feel small, started choosing where to go, who to be around, and where I was actually welcomed. My brothers noticed a shift, even showed a bit of admiration. The Margot who tried to please everyone, she was gone. And the new Margot, she knew how to say no without fear. The year ended with no celebration. but it ended with a warm cup of coffee in my hands and peace in my chest. I sat on the porch, took a deep breath, and let the silence wrap around me. I didn't make resolutions for the new year, didn't write a list of goals. I just repeated one sentence in my mind, like a quiet prayer. Never again will I give myself to those who don't want me around. Because now I knew, if you don't respect me, you don't get to have me. If you liked the story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and if you want to help me keep telling these stories, you can buy me a coffee. The link is there in the first pinned comment. Every cup helps me keep bringing you more stories.